In a recent address, a former president of Nigeria, Olusegun Obasanjo, pointed out that democracy is under threat in Africa, and there is a need for Africa to develop a democratic system that is uniquely tailored to its own cultural, social, and economic realities. On Deep Track, we explore the implications of this call, discuss the feasibility of developing such a system, and examine what it could mean for the future of Nigerian governance.
Pundits have said the future of Africa's democracy is based on the establishment and the development of constitutional schedules. Schedules that bring to life viable institutions within which to carry on the business of governance, that fosters a conducive environment where security, development, and peace can reign. Now, take Rwanda, for instance. Did it take the 1994 genocide for her to find her feet? Yes. They say sometimes you have to get lost to find your way. Well, so it could be. But now, look at Nigeria and Rwanda. They both operate a multi-party political system. So what's missing, if I may ask, in Nigeria? I think that's where the rubber hits the road. On Deep Track, Professor Sylvester Odion Akhaine, Professor, Political Sciences, Lagos State University, LASU, throws more light on the call for homegrown democracy in Nigeria. Thank you for your time, Professor.
Thank you.
And it feels good to have you in our studios.
Yeah, my pleasure to be here.
Most Nigerians will tell you the Western democracy is not delivering the goods or the dividends of democracy here in Nigeria. Professor Akhaine, make us to understand, the essence of Obasanjo's proposal, Afro-democracy, and its potential impact on Nigeria's democratic journey. Incidentally, you were at that meeting in Abeokuta last year.
Well, I think that we are in search of, a qualifier, because the meeting we had at the Presidential Library in Abeokuta was about enhancing the democratic process in the continent. And the dominant regime type is liberal democracy, or what you may call Western democracy.
Yeah.
We are practicing it, and we've seen also the contradictions. And so, His Excellency, President Obasanjo, felt that he needed to organize a conversation, among Nigerian scholars. Not just only Nigerian scholars, there were people outside of, the academia who were there on how we can deal with those contradictions within the liberal democratic process. So if engendering what I may call traditional values into liberal democracy makes it Afro-democracy, that is fine. What Obasanjo tried to mainstream in Abeokuta is not just about saying Afro-democracy. Leadership in Africa has been practicing those things. In one of my research journey, I was in Lusaka in Zambia, and I went to the parliament to experience their parliamentary session. My host told me, look, the minorities in Zambia are given special seats in the parliament. You don't base it on election, in which case majority, when you talk about first past the post, majority will win those seats. But in order to account for that, minority sensibility, inclusivity, seats are reserved for them in the parliament. And if you remember, before Tanzania became multi-party under Julius Nyerere, military officers are appointed as diplomats. And so those things are done to ensure stability within the polity.
Now, do you honestly think, that Africa's, or specifically, Nigeria's developmental troubles are a direct fallout from the adoption of democratic values of the West? Could it be ascribed to, our adoption of democratic values of the West?
There are three factors. One, the foundation of the Nigerian state. That is the first thing.
Yeah.
Then The second one is the nature of the elite, of the governing elite. When I talk about the foundation of the Nigerian state, anybody who lives in Nigeria would have discovered that we are still searching for what Alfred Stepan calls the rightfulness of the unit. That's why people are talking about the structuring. We have not gotten, the type of state that we want. Nigeria entered into independent life. The post-colony was based on federalism. Nigeria was a federation, with basic constitutional provisions that underpin that federation. That was the state system that we adopted. By 1966, that was truncated. The country oscillated towards centralism. And that is still the crisis that Nigeria is in. So the hiccups in terms of coup d'etat, malfeasance of politicians, are a fallout of the lack of, what I would call a foundation, a solid foundation. But that's it. Now, I have argued in a 2009 article in the Journal of African and Asian Studies that, look, liberal democracy has its shortcomings. But the unworkability of liberal democracy in a place like Nigeria is not because the tenets of liberal democracy, are counterproductive to our own aspirations, but rather a deliberate subversion by the governing elites.
So do you mean that we are actually really practicing liberal democracy in Nigeria, as it were, from what you said?
Yes, it's liberal democracy with all the deficits. That's what we're practicing. What the Nigerian elite chose in 1999 is American-type liberal democracy. Multi-party, periodic elections. You are supposed to also have the media as a bellwether within that context. So liberalism is about, clusters, a cluster of freedoms. Political, civil rights, and all of them are embedded in that cluster.
But if we have to take ourselves back, take our thoughts back, we obviously had ruled ourselves before colonialism. We had a good number of empires. And we had flourishing kingdoms then, yeah? So former President Obasanjo seems to be advocating, as it were, the adoption of, I go back to that word, Afro-democracy, which should be connected to our culture, obviously. Should be connected to our history, our ways of life. How does Obasanjo's vision then differ from, the current democratic system we're practicing in Nigeria?
You can point out a number of contradictions within the Nigerian polity. Elections are not free and fair. The media, even though very assertive, is not free from executive repression, and corruption is everywhere, and all of that. So when you look at that, development is actually at a standstill. As Claude Ake argued years back, it is not even on the agenda. And you have a ruling elite that is anti-development, anti-intellectual. When you have that kind of combination, the country will not grow. Now, I have argued that there are a few things you can bring in. For instance, within the Yoruba culture, there is this concept of Omoluabi, which we are talking about a broad universe of integrity, respectability, and the rest of them. Yes. Civility. Now, you see that even within the traditional domain. That is something that you can mainstream into the democratic process. Yeah.
But some people have said, if I may cut in, some people have said that even the Omoluabi that you mentioned, so to speak, or look at the Southeast too are agitating. They want their own, what do you call it now? Their own independence or country. Even amongst those, even when it happens, what makes us feel that we won't still have that division, internal division amongst us?
What is politics? It's about contestation for power. So even if you break Nigeria into 20 countries, there will be contestation for power within each of the separate republics. They are we. So we should not, run away from that. It's about a leadership. Because, there's this saying that Africa needs strong institutions, not big men.
Okay.
But you need strong leaders, to build institutions. Lee Kuan Yew, for example, in Singapore. Deng Xiaoping in China. So there are many examples you can give at that level. So we should not be scared that, I'm not saying that the country should divide. I'm a lover of African unity because we are the same people. Yeah. If you moved around the continent, you will know that we are the same people. Cultural affinity, we have the same race. So we need unity at all costs.
So proponents of democracy, especially the kind of democracy practiced in the US and maybe Britain and France, the proponents look at the institutions, which are strong, strongly established institutions. And they say, with these institutions, it is easy for us to stem maybe corruption. Mm-hmm. Now, why has it taken us this long to be able to build such institutions?
What is important and fundamental is that you must have a group of elites who are fixated, on remedying those contradictions.
And do we have such elites?
We don't. That's the point here. That is the tragedy. If you look at British history, look at, France. France has the bloodiest history in Europe, the most. Killings, they were burying people alive in France of the 19th century, even early 20th century in France. In Britain, knights were being quartered. Knights will be quartered. To quarter mean when you kill a knight who is a military person, you divide the body into parts and throw them into different parts. One leg in Birmingham, one hand in Liverpool, against the need that the guy might come back alive, miraculously. Those things happen. In Ireland, British colonialists practiced what they call disemboweling against the Irish people. So they went through all of that. But you see, what is distinct about a people is that you have a core that says, look, this is the direction we are going. Somebody brought United Italy. Somebody united Germany. So that is the kind of thing we are lacking in Nigeria. Okay. So we need a nation-building elite.
Okay.
Across the nationalities. From the north, from the east.
Yeah, one hates to feel or think like in some quarters it might take us another 50 years, 100 years to be able to get to, the states of life and living that those in the West are enjoying. And it probably will take us all these gory stories that you are telling us. Do you see that as the trajectory for Nigeria?
No, I think there is a historical dilemma, which is this. At the time, all those countries we talk about, the great powers, built their country. The world was not interconnected the way it is now. People could go into any country and take resources away to build their country. But today, we are relating almost on the same wavelength. Developmental difference is there. So you know that nobody's going to wait for you to catch up. So it's a huge jungle where you have to struggle. That's the dilemma. So that we cannot say because British got it right in 400 years, Nigeria will get it right in 400 years. No, that's no longer possible. Because even right now, we are in a hurry.
All right, back to this homegrown model of democracy. What practical steps would be necessary to transition from Nigeria's current democratic system, as it were, to a homegrown model for also transition?
When you talk about homegrown, the first thing is that there's also a historical fallacy, which is that we look at democracy as Western. If you look back, I have argued in one of my writings that that the Athenian democracy was not, deeper than the democracy that was practiced in Umuofia, in Chino Achebe's things fall apart.
Okay.
That even the slave boy, he came in from could carry the stool for his boss to sit in the village meeting, and the boy would be there. The slaves, the servants were not, excused from the meeting. But in the Athenian Greek, women and slaves were not part of it, even though it was direct democracy. So we have those values in Africa. So we already have those things.
Yeah.
So it's about mainstreaming those things to stabilize our polity. And the Westerners are not opposed to it. What the Westerners are opposed to, because they are dominant powers, is when you block them from extracting resources from your country. That's where the problem lies. They will even destabilize you. Engineer a coup d'etat so that they can have access to your resources. You saw what the boys in Burkina Faso and the GS have done. They've asked the Americans and the French forces to leave their country. And of course, they are not happy about it. They are not happy about it. So the externality in terms of our foundation of democracy is about access to resources. The moment you are able to strike that balance, they will be praising you, applauding you, that your democracy is working.
Today, one of the things we are complaining about in our country is inflation, high price of, food items and what have you. I spoke with a security expert recently, Reverend Laddie Thompson, a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Now, let's take a listen.
We need to tropicalize the democracy that we are practicing instead of this shambolic American quote copy, which is no American copy. Once we do that, give me 18 months with sensible people in this country. Trust me, Italians will come and try to be getting Nigerian passports. Britons, Germans will be running back to Nigeria to try and get a Nigerian passport because we will re-engineer Nigeria and create a nation so enviable. Look at our numbers. Look at our diversity. When we're able to manage inclusion, diversity, and the multicultural mix that we have with the natural resources that we have, excuse me, this would be paradise on earth.
So what long-term benefits could arise from adopting homegrown democratic system in Nigeria, especially as it concerns, benefiting the common man?
I get what you are making.
Yeah.
What is clear, we have argued it with scholars in the academia. My own definition of democracy, if democracy cannot engender socioeconomic, prosperity for the people, you don't have democracy. You don't. Even the conception of democracy by our people is about dividends of democracy. It's captured in a different way. Ayafayashe talks about stomach infrastructure. He's talking about well-being, even though you can look at that from a negative point of view. That people sell their rights, for what they call it now, for a mess of pottage or whatever.
Yeah.
But again, there's this musician in Benin who's late now, Osayomori.
Joseph.
Okay,
yes. Yeah.
He has a song titled "Follow Democracy," and the part of the lyric says, "Follow democracy." It's a government of jolly jolly. So this is the conception of democracy by the ordinary person. If no matter what you say, if your democracy cannot provide an environment where people can go about, pursuing their daily bread, go to the farm, go to the market, and the rest of them, facilities, potable water, and all of that. Democracy can't provide it, then there's no democracy. Because the concept of government in Africa was about, peace, social order. And they have a, a combination of instruments that were deployed to ensure that you have that social order, which allows for farming. You can't kill in the community and you want to live in that community. You are either ostracized or you also receive capital punishment. So those paraphernalia were there to ensure that you have a stable environment for people to actualize, their life ambition.
Okay, so we keep blaming, again, I'll go back to our political, Western proponents of democracy. We keep blaming the Western proponents of democracy decades after they left us to rule ourselves. Okay, so from your own perspective, how can Nigerians generally, I'm not talking about the elites, I'm not talking about the politicians, how can Nigerians generally contribute to this discourse? And support the movement towards better tailored democratic system in our country?
I normally say that leadership and followership, they are co-constructed. You can't separate, each from the other. I was in the student movement, I understand what it takes to galvanize public opinion and the rest of them. Nigerians know what is good for them when they see one. What are the things Nigerians want? They will tell you today if you ask them, they want stable electricity. They want cheap transportation. They want housing. And so many, and a host of other things that they require. Now, those are the ideas, the values that we should mainstream within our democracy.
There's been political experts who seem to agree that the health of the United States democracy has declined in recent years. Now, the US now appears to be grappling with, they call it election manipulation. They call it executive overreach. Okay, so come to think of it, is there actually a standard democracy maybe system in the world? More like a benchmark?
Again, democracy is an unfinished business. Even in the so-called advanced democracy, they have their contradictions. I wrote a piece about 2 years ago titled Why Coup May Happen in America. You can Google it on academia.edu. It's a very a polemic piece, pointing out the contradictions in American democracy. So what you are seeing tells you about the elite contestation in America, to the extent that a former president was almost assassinated a few days ago. So, but again, let me make the point. It is not about those contradictions. What matters is your capacity to resolve those contradictions. And you may not like a Joe Biden, but you saw what he did. The first thing was to say, look, we don't need this kind of violence in our society. We need to unite. You see a late orientation. Because if they are divided, the American, as a great power will collapse. So they need to patch up. They're already aware that we are in a divided society. So we need to do something, for elite, reconciliation and unity. But here, everybody goes for the broke. And that is that's the problem we have in Nigeria. We don't have that elite, that is committed towards national unity and development.
Okay, you are more of a political analyst, I must say. There may have been something I did not touch on, a question I did ask that you think you need to enlighten us about, as short as it can be, something you want to talk about, you want to conclude with that is poignant, that I didn't mention.
Yes, I got the point I'm making. The Cuban president, an avowed federalist, in quotes now, perhaps does not understand, the question of local government autonomy. The local government as they exist are autonomized within the law. They are autonomized within the law. But if that process has been abused by the governors, you don't therefore reconcile a contradiction with another contradiction. The 774 local government were created arbitrarily. And in 1999, they were engrossed in the Constitution, and they became legal entity. That is why you can have an abnormality in which Lagos has 20 local government, Kano has 44, even when Jigawa is taken away from it. Oh. When you add Jigawa to it, Kano probably about 89 local government. Now you not give them physical autonomy. What you have enabled is state capture. Because within the Nigerian Federation, there are two tiers, the state and the center. So everything about local government should fall within the legislative competence of the state. So what we have done is to reinforce the center.
Which is the federal.
Which is the federal.
Yeah.
And we have said openly that we are fighting for federalization. So I don't know.
Maybe that should be put to a debate by the Senate or the House.
No, the House of Reps already on it.
Okay.
I think quite a lot of people are already talking about it. The issue has gained attention. Mm. It has even become a leader in some of the newspapers already.
And we expect that the state governors will also react to that.
The state government didn't quite understand the issues very well. You see, the contestation for power in Nigeria is such that those who have dominated Nigerian government post-1966 have always done everything to retain that hegemonic control. And that is what they have done with the local government autonomy. They first came in through NFIU, this National Financial Intelligence Unit. Mm. It has nothing to do with local government. NFIU was advised by the World Bank and the IMF after the September 11 attack in the US, that you set up this intelligence unit to monitor the movement of resources so that money does not go into the hands of terrorists and jihadists. That was it. But that was what they were using as a basis to argue for local government autonomy in Nigeria. Unfortunately, those in the southern half of the country did not see through it. And you now have a southern person as president, he has played into their hands by autonomizing the 774 local government that we arbitrarily created, and therefore enhancing state capture by the same hegemonic class in the country.
Thank you so very much again for your time, Professor. Our guest today, Professor Sylvester Odion Akhaine, the Professor, Political Science, Lagos State University, LASU. Thank you for watching. We'll do this again soon. Thank you, sir, for coming.
Thank you, Gordon.